Welcome to part 2 of my acoustics course. I'm John Hunter, owner, founder, CEO, product architect, and acoustical consultant for John Hunter Acoustics, where we've treated rooms of every shape and size you can imagine for all different kinds of purposes: restaurants, cathedrals, churches, recording studios, mastering, production, writing, you name it. So I'm going to get into this subject of what is a bass trap and what kind of material do you need. So let's get into it. So what is a bass trap? A bass trap is just like it sounds. It's an absorber of bass. But where does the thickness start? So the thickness starts with 4-inch thick. And that's a 4-inch thick piece of rock wool, for instance. So rock wool is a great absorber of low end. So 4-inch rock wool safe is what we use in our bass traps. So safe, and we use 4 pounds per cubic foot density. That's a good absorber of bass frequency. It has a proper density, and this is in a 2x4 or a large panel, 4x6, 2x6, 2x8. So 4-inch thick rock wool safe is a great material for absorbing low end. Now, what do you want to avoid? You want to avoid foam, for instance. That's no good for bass absorption. Foam is great for high frequency absorption, just getting rid of echo. There are issues with it even in the low mid frequencies, but that's something you want to avoid, using foam in a bass trap. Any claim of a bass trap with foam is likely not true because it's not going to absorb the low end. It lacks the density. So 4-inch, you start off absorbing bass. And at what frequency though? So 125 hertz. You have 100% absorption. So 100% absorption, 125 hertz. It starts dropping off. It still absorbs at 80 hertz, but then it starts to drop off. So how do you absorb even lower? You go thicker. So you go 8-inch. So you double up this material of 4-inch to create an 8-inch bass trap. Where do you need a 4-inch? Where do you need an 8-inch, for instance? So 4-inch bass traps are great if you have speakers that aren't real hefty, and the woofer is like 6-inch or 8-inch woofer. If you have a large 10-inch woofer or bigger, or your speakers have a sub, or you're mixing with a sub, that's when you want to use 8-inch, because they'll absorb in the 60 hertz range and even lower. And where do you want to place 8-inch bass traps? When mixing with a sub, you could take 8-inch bass traps, put them in your front corners. So you have a corner, you have your front corners over here. Do 8-inch. And especially 8-inch in the bottom of the corners. What we do is we combine our 8-inch with a 4-inch on top to fill up the rest of the corner. Often that's plenty. So 4-inch on top. The 8-inch is half angled, so these actually line up. In our design, they line up. They're half angled 8-inch with a 4-inch on top. You're covering 8 feet. Bass builds up more, the subloads in the bottom of the corner. We cover with 8-inch on the bottom, 4-inch on top. And that's 4-inch and 8-inch. Now you have other thicker panels like 6-inch, for instance. 6-inch we use in a room that has more depth, more volume, a larger room, like say 14 by 20 or something. Sort of tall ceilings. You need more bass absorption, more echo absorption. The added thickness is going to absorb more sound. Now our 6-inch panels, we use rock wool. Safe and sound. It is a lighter weight material. It's only 2.4 pounds per cubic foot density. It's still effective because it's rock wool and still has good density. It's lighter density, but it still absorbs about 10% more than the 4-inch do. So you got 10% absorption, a little bit better. And if you have a room that has more volume, use a 6-inch. Now, the 6-inch and 9-inch go well together, just like our 4-inch and 8-inch. The 9-inch are partially angled, the 6-inch on top, so you do a 9-inch and a 6-inch on top of that. If you have more area to work with, a larger room. So 6-inch and 9-inch are great bass traps as well, using rock wool, safe and sound, 2.4 pounds per cubic foot density. The reason you don't get a lot more absorption, just 10%, is the lighter weight density material. So now what I'm talking about here is with 2x4 panels. And if you just have an 8-foot ceiling, you can use 2x4 panels. One single panel is not going to absorb a lot of bass. It's the combined effort of all the panels. So like you want to treat your corners, first reflection, side reflections, cloud up above. just using 2x4s in an 8-foot ceiling is totally fine. So you have an 8-foot ceiling, use 2x4s. Now if your ceiling gets taller, like 10 feet or 12 feet, you want to use larger panels, or if you're mixing with a sub, if your speakers produce a lot of sub-low frequency, then use 2x6s, 4x6s, and then 8-inch thick bass traps in your corners. So taller, more area, and you're mixing with a sub, or your speakers reach really low frequencies in the sub range, then use 2x6s or 4x6s to treat your first and side reflection points, and then 8-inch or 9 for your corners. So that's a little summary of what is a bass trap, what thickness do you need, what type of material. So rock wool is a great option. Owens Corning works well, but we stick to rock wool. There are many advantages to rock wool. So that's a summary that answers the question of what is a bass trap, what material do you need, what size panel, what thickness, for what purpose. Leave any comments, questions, like and subscribe this video and our channel. We're going to get into the next video for part 3, which will be where to place panels in a studio to treat it properly. We'll catch you in the next one.